Hey guys, welcome to Fringe FM, the show where we get interesting folks focused on the future. And today we've got one of them, David Cuartielles. Thanks for coming today, David.
Hey.
So David, you co-founded Arduino, and you're still working at university and studying like a madman. What's the deal? Arduino is incredibly successful at this point. Talk to me a little bit about the open source movement. It's your background.
Well, yeah. Basically, I just graduated actually from my PhD just like a week and a half ago, more or less. So I studied engineering almost 20 years ago and moved to Sweden 18 years ago. And at some point, I was invited to join as a PhD student. And I was always very interested in open source and technology and what it meant for society. So I actually joined the School of Design of Malmö University. And as part of my process, I met with other folks, actually Massimo Bansi, Dave Mellis, and Tomago, and I ended up creating Arduino together with them. I guess I was instrumental.
It's getting even more echoey. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, but I have an idea. What if I change the microphone?
Try changing the microphone.
Because I'm having this pretty good microphone, of course, and these things typically. I will disconnect the microphone. So you will stop hearing me for a second. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
And I will just
testing. How's that? Okay. It sounds good, whatever this is. Nope, now you're gone. Technology is great until it's terrible.
By the way, 1 second. What about now? You hear me?
Yeah, it sounds good. Perfect.
Yeah, so right now I'm recording on one microphone, and I'm gonna get this.
It sounds good now.
What about now?
That sounds even better.
Okay, great. So now we have the best microphone on the box.
Perfect. Here we go. And I'll just record it on the Google Hangouts. I closed the Zencaster thing. It was having problems.
Oh, okay.
So let me just try that one more time. So Arduino, you've built one of, if not the most successful open source projects to date, at least especially open source hardware. And yet you're still studying, working at university, and just absolutely busy. Tell me a little bit about your background in the open source movement.
So basically, I studied engineering in the first place, and then I work as an engineer for a couple of years, and then I got the opportunity of becoming a university teacher at Malmö University. And I was 25 years old and young and unexperienced, and I thought this sounds awesome, 3 months vacation. So I moved to Sweden, and what I thought it was 3 months vacation ended up with, oh, when you have vacation, you should think about doing research. And in one of those research residencies, I ended up meeting my partners, Massimo, Tom, and Dave, and ended up co-founding the Arduino platform. And I guess I was instrumental in building it open source because I was very influenced by previous experiences in projects where our projects failed because we failed at finding a sustainable way to keep the thing running. But I also learned very early on that if you wanted to have something that was working fine, you need to have your own source of money to maintain yourself. So I decided to never quit academia. Also because I'm the first person in my family actually getting a PhD, which I got just recently. And so I really wanted to continue to be a student, and it allowed me to also keep it real, because if I'm at the university and I interact with other students and with researchers and so on, I know exactly what is needed in terms of technology to keep on doing good stuff. And that is what I bring back to Arduino on a day-to-day basis, where we design technologies for education and the 4.0 industry. I bring this experience of being on the field all the time.
And you got to be on the field all the time. I want to dive into the education side in a little bit, but first, open source. How do you make that economically viable? There's Wikipedia and they take donations. There's Linux and Linux does what Linux does, but it's incredibly challenging, and yet open source seems to be the future.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. I mean, for the first 5 years, we didn't make a dime. And then when we started to get very, very busy, we realized that we needed some money to hire people to help us out. So the following 5 years, we spent most of the money we're getting paying other people and not paying ourselves. And only the last couple of years, Massimo and I decided to put a significant amount of time in making it part of our jobs. Tom and Dave decided to keep their role as advisors, and so on. So when it comes to make open source, I guess you have to make sacrifices before it becomes successful. I mean, you mentioned Linux, for example. You know, Linux right now is 85% supported by big corporations. The Linux project itself. But in the beginning, it was a lot of volunteer work being put into it. Right now, those volunteers are professional programmers being paid by Intel, Microsoft. I mean, you say it, you know, and they're contributing to this body of work because it's meaningful for all of these companies. And for us, because we make hardware, among other things, it's a bit different because we need to maintain our own IP, and the level of engagement we get is slightly different. And also, it's hard to get to collaborate with people because at the end of the day, you need to make an economic decision on, do I put this chip here or not? You know, which is very different from accepting a pull request. and the way we did it is having a mixed model. We have a mixed model, not in licensing, but in business, where we sell hardware, but we give the license to the design for free. We create content, but we sell it as education. You know, we've had to figure out different vehicles for making it happen. Because to be completely honest, donations don't pay even half a developer a month at this point in our project.
So why did you decide to go the open source route? Why not play the devil's advocate business style?
Well, in 2005 when we started, nobody believed in our story, and there were different projects trying to do a similar thing. You know, the open, or let's say open, but embedded electronics for education is an emergent phenomenon that starts to show up in the mid 2000s. And when we showed up, we realized that people were open sourcing the IDE, but not the bootloader, or they were open sourcing the hardware design, but not the software. You know, there were all these different models. And we realized the really radical thing was to make the whole stack open source and then try to charge for services, which is very similar to what software does in the free software movement. And we went for that, and it turned out to be working for a while pretty well. But as we grew and grew, we realized that then competition starts to show up, and then you need to compete in other terms. And we decided to compete in quality. You know, we decided to give people high quality products and high quality software and high quality content, trying to keep the price instead of like putting down the prices and trying to compete on price, which is what other people do. And we're proving that it works, which is a very interesting situation because we keep on doing open source things, but high quality things. And that's basically competing in an entirely different, it's an entirely different proposition in terms of competition.
And the quality is much harder to have on open source hardware than it is for open source software. Hardware is so much harder.
Yeah, people actually tend to compromise things like, I don't know, the backlight on the circuit or the paint, or you know, you will figure out amazing things. I mean, you see it when you buy or when you look at clone Arduino boards, you realize where people are compromising. And we basically started a couple of years ago to try to offer more and more services. For example, now we offer real support with a support team with several people working on it. You know, that's a full-time job, answering support tickets, and nobody pays for it. You know, well, when you buy a board, then you're paying for the support. But then we take support tickets from anybody that emails to support@arduino.cc. And this means that many times we discover people are asking for support because they bought a counterfeit board. and But still, you know, for every counterfeit ticket, we get 10 legit tickets. And sometimes people know they bought counterfeit, so they don't even bother using the support email address. So it is very interesting, and I think it's very relevant as well because we're proving that alternative models are possible and they actually work. Of course, there is also this thing that is really hard to start today, you know, because we have 13 years of experience. We've been there for a long time building a brand, and just showing up with no money like we did, because the total investment on our end is about 6,000 euros in the beginning, you know, because it was very organic. You know, everything that was coming in was being sold again, and the money was coming in, and then we spend the money buying more stuff and selling more stuff, because we had our jobs and we kept our jobs, and to the day where we are still teaching at universities and keep our jobs part-time, so we can get the project rolling. The difference is that right now we have a CEO and we have 80 employees and we have 3 offices, and so that's the difference. So it works. It's a matter of being patient, and actually, I always say this, but it's a matter of not following the 2 years startup cycle. The 2-year startup cycle will kill any kind of project that tries to, for example, play into the education market, which needs 4 or 5 years to start being profitable.
I think a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with Arduino, but if not, can you briefly talk about what Arduino is, and then we'll jump into education DIY in a bit more.
Okay. Yeah. So Arduino started as a circuit board that was trying to help designers and artists to create fully working prototypes with electronics, digital electronics, so they could build their own interfaces to computers. Let's say you wanted to make an art installation that was triggering video when the temperature was changing in the room. You needed to add an extra temperature sensor that computers didn't have access to, and then you had to run your video loops or whatever. Or you were a designer that was trying to prototype a new device, and you needed this hardware to try things out. So we thought that it was a bit undemocratic and unfair that these people didn't get access to the right or the proper prototyping tools. So the barrier was artificially high to enter into start using these tools. So we decided to create a hardware tool that would allow people to start prototyping very quickly. What happened is that in order to create this hardware prototyping tool, we needed to make a software environment to program this hardware, because it's a digital hardware that's a microcontroller. And then we needed to create content so people could learn about it. So we ended up making a full platform with, a forum and a blog and a lot of stuff where people can get access to a lot of content and can collaborate in building projects and so on. So it grew from small, 5 times 7 centimeters blue open hardware electronic circuit to 580,000 registered developers on our forum and 26 million unique visitors a year. So it's been a ride.
Why do you think it's taken off so much?
Well, I think first thing was the mouth to mouth. We spent $0 in marketing in the first 11 years of the project. We couldn't afford it, basically. And by giving people authorship, but by making things open source, everybody becomes a bit of an owner of this thing. And then people feel a lot more committed, because they say, yeah, this is a bit mine. And I added this thing, I added this library, or I made this add-on board to it, or I made this project using this and these technologies. And 3 months ago, I didn't know anything about programming, and suddenly these people started to talk to other people, and we have beautiful stories. For example, at ITP, the School of the Arts from New York University, where Tom, one of the partners and founders, works. They put down a wall because and they made the lab bigger, because they have this lab behind a wall where they had 4 computers with a software license to program microcontrollers. The moment all of the students started to use Arduino, they didn't need to use those computers because they could use their own computers to program. So they basically could put down that wall and gain more square meters for an open lab. So that's just one example of the many stories that came out. Students telling teachers, why don't we use this tool instead of whatever we're having, because then everybody can have it. Students in underprivileged areas that could get access to technology through derivative boards, because maybe they couldn't afford ours, but they could afford somebody else's, and in that way they could get access to better education and eventually make their own jobs later on. So it took off to mouth, basically. And nowadays we play in a different league, I have to say. We have been collaborating with all of the big companies. We've been collaborating with Microsoft, Intel, Samsung, more or less every company that makes a proof of concept microcontroller board. They give it the shape of the original Arduino boards. Just recently Sony launched this new platform for prototyping sound-based applications, and it's shaped like the original Arduino board, for example. So it became a de facto standard for people to prototype and build things. And that makes it very interesting and appealing, because then all people see it and then they also get engaged and they also want to use it.
Yeah, it brought the cost down an order of magnitude, at least for startups. Hardware was always hard and expensive, but now you can prototype much faster with Arduino and other open source type technologies.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a repetition of the story. Do you know the history of Commodore 64?
No.
Oh, there's a book called, I think it's called Over the Edge, I think it's called, and it tells the story of Commodore 64. And it's a bit of a hard read, it's really a really thick book. But if you're a Commodore fan, you totally have to read it. And it explains how what Commodore did was not to make a very appealing computer. They definitely did that. What they did was to take the Motorola microcontroller that was $300 and make their own version for $30. So by pushing down the microcontroller one order of magnitude, they could make cheap computers for people. And actually, the Apple computer is based on the prototyping kit from Commodore. The original Apple computers were made with Commodore technology. So you see there, it's something as important as getting something in technology and putting one order of magnitude down allows for many people to start using it. And the only reason why we could do this in Arduino is actually because ABR offer people a microchip, the ATmega family, that you could program with a completely open source toolchain. So you could compile this toolchain for any operating system. So anybody in the world with any computer, no matter how old, could program microcontrollers for free. And that really made a difference. But the only thing we did was to communicate this to everybody by making an open source piece of hardware that was honoring that piece of software that these guys had made before. So I think, it's a history repeating in a way.
It does. When more people get technology in their hands, awesome things happen. I know you're really passionate about that, about empowering, especially underprivileged individuals and people that aren't in great situations to get technology in their hands and improve education. Where do you see us headed in that direction?
Well, I'm a strong defender of empowering teachers. I think many people that are looking at technology in education, they are focusing on the kids, which of course you have to. The kids are the ultimate receivers of the educational action. But I think the teachers are the vehicle that makes that possible. They are the ones that interact with the kids on a day-to-day basis. They are the ones that run the schools, And I think when trying to create educational technologies and trying to help the educational system to improve, we need to really listen to the teachers and try to have a dialogue with them, an open dialogue, trying to improve things. Because at the end of the day, the politicians can force the teachers to learn stuff, in order to bring that new thing into the class. But if that new thing is not designed to be appealing for the teachers, it's going to be really, really hard for that to be accepted in the long run. So my policy has always been to interact with teachers directly, firsthand. So I do a lot of field work. I'm constantly teaching workshops, lessons, interacting with school authorities in different countries, visiting ministries of education, and trying to learn about what is the reality. And when we design educational products and programs in Arduino, we make it adjusted to their needs. So we don't believe in one size fits all. Hopefully in the future it will be like that, making our job much easier, and also a whole world of education more democratic. But as things are right now, one size doesn't fit all, and we need to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, the school system is pretty wanky. You've got basically a factory to put out factory workers. How do we change that going forward? Because we're entering an era where we don't need any factory workers. We need creative people. We need people that can think outside the box.
Well, yeah, there's different views on that. I'm a follower of school of thought of constructionism, which basically defends the idea that we can use technology in a creative way, and therefore we can teach people through creative actions. And also in project-based learning, where we engage people in educational processes that imply interacting with as real as possible cases where they need to figure out what is needed to solve a problem. For example, you will start a class and you will tell the students, okay, you're going to build a project to solve this or that problem. And then the kids have to make research and figure out which are the tools they need and whether they need to build a prototype or they need to learn electronics to build a prototype or things like that, right? So I'm a strong believer that that kind of system works. And we try to support it. But at the same time, I also know that this is just a temporary solution because, ideally in the future, we will have all the tools that are needed to be able of teaching people, with technology in a much better way. And I think, as I said, that the complex thing really is the pedagogical aspects behind things. So how you design interesting educational interactions with technology so that people can engage in creative processes. And there is a lot of tools that are, working in that way recently. Like the last 5 to 10 years, I think there's been a big change. The problem is dissemination, how you get these things to reach everybody, how you get things translated to multiple languages, how you can engage governments, teachers, parents, and so on to change the system.
Exactly. It takes a lot of people to change the system. I think a big problem too is a lot of kids aren't building anything. They're not getting outside as much as they used to. They're on the phones. Any thoughts? I mean, Arduino is kind of an interesting mixture because you can get kids doing things with electronics and they can enjoy doing it, but it's also playing and learning.
Mhm. Well, I like to say that from that perspective, I like to say that we offer a connection to the world. In a way, the telephone is opening up to this virtual world, this digital universe, while Arduino systems, they are connecting to the physical world. They connect to motors and sensors and so on. So they offer that bridge between the virtual and the physical. And we try to bring this up all the time and adjust our content because also the educational system is changing real fast. When we started 13 years ago, some schools, they only have a couple of stationary computers for the whole school. And nowadays, many schools have fairly old laptops, but every single kid has a mobile phone. After 11, 12 years old, all the kids have smartphones. So we're moving into this area of the bring your own device. So we need to rethink how the educational tools are produced, because that smartphone can be the new notebook. That smartphone can be your own small pocket oscilloscope. Can be so many things. And we need to rethink the way we understand tools. At the same time, we have to be very careful because you might also find situations where kids don't have the phones. So how do you create content that can be adjusted to those situations as well? And what should the school provide or not? So as I said earlier, I think unfortunately one size doesn't fit all. So I think if we're talking education, we should actually distinguish between, I wouldn't say countries. We have to distinguish within a single country between different social classes. And the ability to acquire technology and use it.
Which makes it really hard because then we put all the rich kids together and all the poor kids together, and then we have a different ethical issue.
Yeah, exactly. Today, actually, I'm reading a text about the development of the pedagogical models in Sweden, and there's a prevalent conversation about equality. And there is a big critical. There's a professor that is very critical to the term equality, and I'm trying to understand what she means. Well, she's talking about that by trying to make everything equal, we'll also not engaging in the conversation that might be some students that might need to be stimulated differently because they might be, for example, more intelligent, right? At the same time, there will be students that have special needs and they need to engage in a different kind of conversation. And by trying to bring everybody into the same classroom, they might not be able of interacting at the speed they need for their own personal development. So it's a very interesting thing because then you realize that what might sound more logical from a, let's say, equalitarian and almost sociological perspective, it is not from a development perspective. And then on top of that, we add technology. So as you see, the whole model is very complex and a bit convoluted. But I think we just need to figure out what makes most sense. And I think we need to listen to research because a lot of good research in the field that will, drive this educational innovation in the right direction.
It's super interesting. The problem with trying to make people equal is you always have to have the lowest common denominator. That's what happens with communism is we can make all of these cars, but if we have an extra car that's nice, we might as well burn it because otherwise people aren't equal. It's the same thing with education. If you want to have all the students equal, you have to bring the bottom up to the average versus having
Yeah, I
more
mean,
for the top.
let's say people need to have equal rights, but they also have the right to be treated according to their needs. So that I think that's the right way of putting it. Otherwise, I think we enter into almost a liberal versus libertarian conversation, which I think should not apply to education, because education should not be political in that sense. Um, but yeah, I could talk about this for hours. I don't know if you want to enter into this.
It's a really interesting topic. I wanna jump in. What's the coolest or most interesting stuff you've seen people building with Arduino or Arduino like DIY projects?
Okay, so yeah, I would distinguish two different categories. So on the one hand, there is the do-it-yourself category, which is people in the community, they're experimenting or they're building something for a class, and they're very inspired and they do a crazy thing. And then there's a guy that made this machine that paints rainbows, for example, and it's a bunch of graffiti cans with a long stick and there's a motor. So when he stops his bicycle on the sidewalk by a wall, presses the button, and the whole stick goes like and sprays a beautiful rainbow, perfectly symmetrical, right? And just an Arduino board and a motor to move the stick. On the other hand, there is a lot of really cool scientific devices that are being built by actually academics trying to lower the cost of some scientific equipment. Like the other day, I was visiting a PhD student in Spain who is making a bioprinter. So he hacks 3D printers to add 4 simultaneous printing heads that can print with cells with biomaterial. So he can make amazing synthetic skin experiments, at super speed. And he cut down the price from $100,000 to $3,000. So that's the level of what open source and Arduino can provide right now, and the community, obviously. On the other hand, if you look at corporations, I've seen very interesting things. Like there is this American company called NanoSatisfy that I always talk about, actually, because they made this project called ArduSat, and it's a satellite that's orbiting the Earth and has the equivalent to 8 Arduino Unos on board. So they have this educational kit so that you can, in your class, try some experiments of science experiments, and then you have a time slot on the satellite, so you can replicate the experiment on the satellite, and then you can, see the results and compare how is to make this experiment with gravity and without gravity, and so on. So there is really amazing things.
Well, it's ridiculous when you combine the Arduino type technology with just the advancements we've had in smartphones. All of this tech now costs essentially nothing, and it's a supercomputer. So people are putting up satellites for 1/100th of the cost. You see a whole new space renaissance happening. What areas are you most excited about?
Oof. Everything. Okay. So obviously, I'm very interested in education because that's the field I'm most engaged with. I'm actually CTO of education for Arduino right now, and so I focus on strategies and trying to figure out, if you're in a certain country, which would be the best possible solution to realize certain types of projects, or how to educate hundreds of thousands of students and so on. So that, to me, that's super engaging and it's very interesting. At the same time, as you said, there's a space renaissance, and I think it's because next year is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. So everybody are so much looking forward to it. And we in Arduino Education are going to celebrate it. So next year, we're going to try to make one space-related event each month. And this could be from, let's collaboratively launch CAN satellites to there's this new product that is for you to explore space on your own, So we're going to try to have 12 different things. I'm working on that very actively. So I'm the main curator of that initiative. And then on the other hand, I'm very engaged on the Spanish-speaking community. You have noticed my accent. So I'm actually from Spain. And I'm very interested in trying to promote that people develop technology in Spanish, because most of the technology is developed in English, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But what really bothers me is that because of language, there's a lot of people that don't get first-hand access to technology, and I think it's good to promote that things get translated in both directions much faster, so that we can see how researchers and developers in other cultures can also shine for their skills.
Yeah, it's hard to make something open source for everyone when you have most of the languages that aren't being written or used for the tech. Spanish is like third largest language, second largest at this point.
Yeah, it's third largest, but
Third
it's
one.
the one spoken in the largest amount of countries. So it's the most important official language in the world.
That's one way of looking at it. It's definitely one of the most either way. What do you find on the cutting edge of robotics, mechatronics, etc., that's just most fascinating?
Oof, again, you will have realized I like to say oof a lot. Yeah, well, in robotics, I think one thing that I find very interesting right now is the whole discussion about ethics APIs. So it's not so much about that things can move. Things can move. That's no problem. But now we're talking about the intelligence we embed into technology and how we have to build something that can bring common sense to the actual device. We humans, we have the law as a way to regulate what we do on a day-to-day basis, and then we have ethics as a way to anticipate when things are not regulated. So we apply common sense until a law comes in and says, okay, from now on, you are not allowed to do this, right? Um, so we need to bring this into robotics, and there's big conversations about it. I mean, the classic discussion is the automatic driving car that has to decide whether kills the dog or kills the kid. Um, but then again, if you think about the same conversation in a different culture, maybe the kid has less priority. For example, let's not take a dog, let's take a cow, and we automatically, will be understanding the discourse here. But then the question to me is, how can you implement these ethics APIs that can be localized in terms of culture, can understand different aspects that are needed? Because the problem again is that technology has been developed uh, discriminating cultures most of the times. But then if we need to implement artificial intelligence, we need to be able to implementing this different way of thinking about the decisions to be made. And that I think that's very interesting. I think there is work being done in that field that I think is much more cutting edge than talking about building better motors for a mechatronic device.
Do you think we should change the ethics of devices based off of where they're located? So, for instance, if you make a robot in China, it's perfectly fine with spying on you. If you make a self-driving car in Saudi Arabia and it has to run over a man or a woman, it's going to run over the woman. That we have some of these ethical problems where we can see that certain cultures have it wrong. It's hard to respect their views. Would you build
Uh-huh.
that into tech?
Well, that's a really big question. That's why I'm saying that's where common sense kicks in. So probably you should not. I mean, if you have an ethical issue with developing something, you should probably then not be engaged in that development.
No, I
That's
don't
that's
mean necessarily not to develop it, but I mean, like, let's say we develop
Yeah,
autonomous
yeah, but
vehicles.
but, but yeah, but this is the thing. There is countries that develop weapons and sell them to other countries. So as a developer, my question is always: would you, as a person, be engaged in the development of those weapons? Personally, I will not. But if somebody else was, which I will respect because it's a personal decision at the end of the day, then that person should also ask himself whether it's allowed to follow somebody else's ethical rules. And then again, so if you need to implement something like it's localized, like we were just discussing, then if a company is to sell that service to somebody else, they probably need to have the right developers that can understand that sensibility and so on. But then again, as you see, I'm trying to separate the idea of developing from the idea of what I personally, as David, think, because I think these are two different things. Well, I would personally not do certain things, but I can totally entertain the idea of something happening just for the sake of eventually coming to the conclusion I should not do this. So when the question comes, I can know in advance I should not get engaged into this.
So many
Yeah.
technologists don't do that though. They don't think about the consequences. They just run with it. How do we change that?
I think a lot of people don't think about it because I think it's super exciting to say, oh, I'm going to make a compression that's going to be 10% more efficient, and that's an amazing technical challenge. but then you don't really think which is the guy paying you, or who you are making it for, or what it's going to be used for, right? And that's again something you need to consider, I think. And well, we could enter into the endless conversation of whistleblowers, right? It's like the new technological activism, where it's really hard to stop it. Sometimes the only way of stopping it is to speak aloud and bring it up, you know. And well, we've seen some whistleblowers that ended up burning their hands. You know, you have Assange and you have Snowden and so on. I can't remember now the name of the guy that was the whistleblower for Cambridge Analytica, right? Who ended up perfectly fine, you know, because, well, I shouldn't say this because I don't have the full story, but Cambridge Analytica ended up being proven wrong. So maybe when you work for the private sector instead of the public sector, like Snowden was doing, for example, it's a bit easier to become the whistleblower.
Because that's because in the public sector they just make it illegal and treason. It's not actually different. They just get to write the rules.
Yeah, and in the private sector you have NDAs, no? So it's like so they can sue you for transgressing the NDA, and then you have to try in court to appeal to common sense and say, hey guys, but these guys were breaking the law, you know. And so the other day, just going very reflective of this, they on the Spanish government, in the Spanish parliament, the head of cybersecurity was making a deposition, and he said that the largest threat to cybersecurity nowadays is not nation states, it's large corporations. I mean, it's something that we know, but hearing this from the head of cybersecurity of a country, I think says a lot, right? So I think there is a new. I think we as technologists, we need to think again about what is our role and how much we want to engage, and whether we think we're doing the right thing, and whether money is the thing we want, or we want the greater good and try to make something else. And I think open source again is a really good solution for solving this problem. Because if a corporation or a country is open sourcing all of its technologies as they're being produced, then you get a large amount of people that can peer-to-peer review that technology and highlight potential threats and issues. And then there can be a conversation about it, at least, you know. And then again, that's also why it's very important to educate people in how technologies work, so that you can have enough reviewers to try to understand how things work. Because that's again the problem. If you have a country where nobody develops in Python, for example, and you have a spine technology made in Python being published on GitHub and nobody can review it, then nobody will know that things are going wrong. So as you see, this is the evil circle, and we have to try to break it in a way or another. And personally, I've chosen the role of education and trying to educate people so they can get more aware of things. So they can learn more about technology and digital technology, and they can be participating in these situations where they need to have a say about how technology works and it should be developed further.
What technologies are you most worried about?
Microwave ovens, bicycles.
So European.
imagine bicycles exploding, and I would say, in the light of the recent events in hardware, like this whole Chinese threat of the microchip being embedded in.
Do you think it's bullshit, or do you think there's something there?
I have no idea. I think it's technically possible. That's what I think. I think it's technically possible because right now every single digital device has a bootloader, and you could force that bootloader to load by an I2C interaction, and that very tiny chip that they were showing in the pictures could actually interact through an I2C signal. So we actually had an internal conversation inside the Arduino development team, and everybody agreed, yeah, this is perfectly possible. Whether it's true or not, we should have this chip in our hands and test it. But the idea that it's possible is there. But you don't need to go to China to see this. Look at Intel having their operating system running, in the underlying, in the background of the chips, so they could trigger events and send analytics and do whatever they wanted. And this is a really large corporation, This is one of the examples where open source will have very quickly shown that something was going on.
How do you think about IBM buying Red Hat?
That's interesting. That's a very interesting. That took me completely by surprise the other week. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. Because IBM removed itself from the hardware business many years ago already. Personally, I run Lenovo laptops because I like the hardware a lot. I used to have IBM laptops before, and I was really shocked when they decided to do that, and that made me think a lot. And I think that if they bought Red Hat, is because they understand about the importance of how Linux works and what that brings them. So yeah.
Is it just a dinosaur trying to get into the cloud game because they're so far behind?
Do you think Bluemix is behind? I'm not really sure.
I think I think IBM's definitely behind.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation to be held more with software people. I know that in Arduino we don't have any IBM infrastructure. I know that we do have Google and AWS infrastructure running, and I know many companies, many mid-sized companies that do again have that duet technology, plus a third on their own. In case one fails, they can always fail safe, like fall into the next one and fall into the next one. And typically IBM is not into that list of technologies they implement. So it could be a way for them to go in. At the same time, I think could be a way for them to go into the more mainstream development of Linux, which is so fundamental. I have no idea about how many developers they do actually have. I think Microsoft and Intel are a bit more open about how many people they employ supporting Linux, and I think this could be a way for them to put a foot into this business.
So you're a big fan of open source and self-organization. How do you think about Catalonia and other smaller areas, California to a lesser extent as well, that kind of want to separate but are stuck in this nation-state system?
Okay, I will avoid, as a Spaniard, and respectful of people's opinions. I will avoid to have a very political discussion in that regard, because things have been very ugly among people in Spain because of this debate. Friendship have come. No, but I mean, at a personal level, friendship went broken. People were fighting around the Christmas dinner table and things like this, and I think that is not good, because if anything like this was about to happen, it should happen from the perspective of respect. And at this point, I think people need to really heal and have an honest conversation about things. Catalonia is at 50-50, really. It's literally 50-50. So I don't think any voting can fix that. And I'm not for either position, or to be honest. Again, when it comes to self-organization, I think I'm more for like a global government, like worldwide global government, to fight against asteroids and dinosaurs. I mean, I don't believe in nation states per se. I think they are a necessity right now, but they don't represent their citizens most times. And if you look into academia, you will realize that academics are looking a lot at the importance of cities as real sources of economy and development in the world. And since regions and cities have a say in the educational systems, for example, they also have a say in the research and development environments that they create. And they can exempt taxes to companies so that they can develop their businesses there, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, I think cities are a lot more important. So if you talk about California, for example, do you talk about California, or you talk about San Mateo, or you talk about Los Angeles? That's the question for me. If you talk about Catalonia, you definitely talk about Barcelona. And Barcelona, in general, is actually against independence, for example. but the countryside is for independence. And there's an interesting conversation since there's the same thing happening in the States. In the States right now is a rural versus city fight, you know. And in Sweden, it's a very similar thing. We just had elections, and you can see there's a rural versus city fight. It's like there is a lot more extreme right wing in the countryside than it is in the cities. So I think we need to rethink whether our governance models are really working. We need to think about whether governance models do represent people and support them properly, because they clearly don't feel represented, and that this explains a lot of the weird political successes in the last couple of years.
Political failures is more like it. Yeah, city's a real thing. A government, a country's not actually a real thing. It's just a made up. But we can all see what a city is. I agree. It's interesting looking forward. How do you think about Sweden? Has a pretty solid system. It's not perfect, obviously. There's a lot more right-wing stuff happening lately. But how do you think about, in terms of an ideal, is Sweden close to an ideal? I know a lot of people think of it as something similar.
Well, I've been here for 18 years, and I like Sweden a lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But I don't think it's close to an ideal. There is weaknesses, for example, in the educational system. There is a baby boom in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of issues with schooling. The medical system is definitely not optimal. You are treated different times by different doctors for the same disease when you enter in a process. And so you don't feel treated in a certain, properly, because you get even though the process works fine, from a user perspective, I don't think it's optimal. So there is weaknesses. At the same time, school is for free, universities for free. People have a safety net under themselves, so you can never starve, you can never freeze. If you really are in trouble, you go to the social service, and they're going to help you out, and they will help you go back on your feet, eventually get new education, get new jobs, whatever, right? So that supports people, and that's there. And that's very different from other places. But it's also true that if that thing wasn't there, in a country where the temperature reaches -20 in the winter time, people will probably die. So you need to build that safety net, and I like that. And personally, I have full respect, for example, for people in the US, where you have to take care by yourself of so many things, like insurances and social insurance and all of these kind of things, because here those things are covered. The moment you move here, you subscribe to the social medical service, and they take care of everything. Your kids, they call you once a year to bring them to the dentist. You don't even need to bother to call the dentist. Every year you get a letter saying that 15th of March at 12 p.m. Your kid, or 12, whatever, midday, your kid gets a dentist appointment. Just show up.
What's the tax rate in Sweden?
Well, you will be surprised. It's not that bad.
They're just more efficient. The U.S. government is just so poorly inefficient.
Yeah, but you have to think about it this way. First of all, everybody gets a flat rate social security tax, which is 30%, more or less. And then on top of that, you have a tax depending on your income. And the lowest, I think, is 22, 23% when you have a really low income. Then average, most people will get about 30%. And then when you get much higher, you jump into the 40%, 50% of the remaining. So at the end of the day, people like me, for example, will get 49% of the money that stays in our salary.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, I don't have to bother about the road. I don't have to bother about the hospital. I don't have to bother about public transportation. Or things like public transportation is strongly subsidized. Just to put an example. Right?
The only thing you've got to worry about is the winter being terribly dark.
Well, we have really good lighting systems. Don't you see my face? It looks really.
I know it's pretty good. You're beating out mine, David. I got two last questions for you.
Okay.
The first one being, what's the most unexpectedly awesome thing that's happened to you in your life in the last several months?
Okay, yeah, okay. A week and a half ago, actually 2.5 weeks ago, I developed my PhD after 15 years. So that's definitely the most awesome thing that happened.
Congrats.
Thank you, thank you. A lot of things came on the way. I had a kid. We built Arduino together. I traveled the whole world. We built 5 companies. So it was kind of hard to finish, but I still did it because to me it was something I had to do for myself and for my parents because they pushed me into academia many years ago, and I kind of owe them, the honor of having a PhD in the family. So yeah, so that's the most awesome thing. And my parents were here to see that. That was really cool.
That's quite cool. And the last and most important question, if you had one thing to leave people with, a quote, a call to action, it can be anything, what would it be and why?
Hmm. Well, since I've been talking about empowerment, I think I would say like if you really want to get something done, and you see that nobody else has done it, learn whatever it takes in order to make it yourself, because then you would probably be helping yourself and a lot of other people as well.
And that's the wrap up, guys. There's nothing better. Learn it, do it, live it. David, this has been so much fun. Thanks for coming on. Where's the best place for people to learn more about you, what you do, and say hey?
Well, if they want to learn about me and in, let's say, my Arduino life, they just should go to arduino.cc. In our website, there is blogs and links to our live casts. I make a weekly live cast for absolute beginners in technology just to inspire them every Tuesday at 7 p.m. CET. Um, if they want to know about WT Academic, I can recommend you go to Malmo University Press and find the free PDF for my doctoral thesis, which is extremely boring and will help you sleep in sleepless nights.
Perfect. Like those summers that are full of way too much sunshine. And guys, if you're listening to this, don't go buy your kids some stupid toy. Don't go buy them video games. Buy them something that they actually learn and it can experience something awesome. Arduino is very cool. I love what you guys are doing. I love empowering education and making kids and people more awesome. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sweet. Cheers, guys. Talk to you again soon.